If you're watching this live, even as we speak, more evidence for or against Keir Starmer in a continuing investigation into whether he misled Parliament. At the same time, we've got the stooges for Starmer on the news saying that accusations are baseless. If so, why are they so afraid of an inquiry? Welcome to Lembit Opik Live.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
Okay, you gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. That's exactly what you're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome on one and all, Lembit Opik here on Lembit Opik Live. There's a clue in the name, on Unprecedented TV. Please do like and subscribe at Unprecedented TV as we go from strength to strength in our relentless efforts to bring you the facts as best we can see them, together with our opinions. But now the twain shall meet. You'll be able to tell when it's our view because we'll say, in our view. It's not that difficult. Apparently, that simple ruse defeats the mainstream media who want to dress up their opinions as facts. Well, we don't do that here. And today we're going to talk about quite a few opinions. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Has he misled Parliament? Which is a pretty big deal because if he did mislead Parliament, he has to resign. Or has everything he said been the truth? Has he unwittingly made a mistake which isn't worth resignation? Or has he been telling porky pies, aka lies? Well, the general view amongst my friends is that he hasn't been telling the truth, that there should be an inquiry to find out what he really knew about Peter Mandelson. It seems to me personally that he has desperately contradicted himself in his own defense. The only reason he's survived is because we haven't had the most forensic analysis and teardown of his opinions in Parliament, because at the moment we're not that well served by our political classes. At any rate, it does seem to me we're in a situation where we've only got a caretaker prime minister now, but it still begs the question, has Keir Starmer lied? Why? Because Keir Starmer made a very big deal of this and the fact that Boris Johnson couldn't be trusted in the past. He also promised change. I don't see much change in terms of the trustworthiness of our government nor our prime minister. So he's raised the stakes, and it's those stakes that we're going to discuss now with Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, one of the cleverest people I know. Good to see you, Marcus. How are you doing?
Good morning, Lembit. I'm very well, thank you. And thank you, as always, for having me on your show.
You know, if you were Keir Starmer and you said that, I wouldn't believe you. There's nothing that I would trust anymore from him, I have to tell you. That's my opinion, because it seems so obvious to me that Keir Starmer hasn't been telling the truth. Now, to set the scene here, maybe I'm being harsh, and you feel free to gainsay me. Starmer faces vote on inquiry over Mandelson vetting claims. Now, this has really provoked me. The context here is there's a vote in Parliament, if you're watching this live, where the opposition parties have said, let's have an inquiry into finding out if the Prime Minister misled Parliament or not. And Labour is on what's called a three-line whip. That means you absolutely have to vote with Keir Starmer to oppose this. I wonder if this is a massive own goal, Marcus, because it looks like they're terrified of the truth.
On the face of it, Lembit, all that we see happening in Britain today, for example, the matter relating to Peter Mandelson, is peculiar, indeed extremely peculiar. However, it is not inexplicable. What we have to do is understand something, and understand something very clearly. Britain is neither a democracy nor an open society. Instead, Britain is a tyranny and a kleptocracy. After all, as the likes of John Milton, John Locke, and John Stuart Mill said, tyranny comes in different shapes and forms. You have, for example, an overt tyranny, such as North Korea. Then you have a clever tyranny which masquerades as a democracy and an open society. So, for example, Britain. And on that matter, Lembit, I have more respect for the regime in North Korea than I do for the regime in Britain.
Wow, whoa. Just say that again. You have more respect for the regime in North Korea than the one in Britain now?
Yes, I do. And allow me to explain why.
Go ahead.
The regime in North Korea openly says that North Korea is a one-party state. Whilst I disagree with tyrannies and one-party states, at least the regime in North Korea is honest in that it says it is a one-party state. However, the regime in Britain says it is a democracy, that it is transparent, that it forms an open society, that the rule of law exists in Britain. That is why I have more respect for the regime in North Korea, because they are honest. The regime in Britain is a liar, and a pathological liar at that. So, returning to Starmer. Starmer is, of course, a pathological liar, as indeed all of them are in the cabinet.
For the sake of fairness, in your opinion, because you can't necessarily prove that, can you? Can you?
Come again, prove what?
That he's a pathological liar. I'm just trying to make sure we don't get sued.
Yes, well, let's just analytically look at everything he has said and done since he became Prime Minister in July of 2024. It's not rocket science. It is so easy to demonstrate that he is a pathological liar. He lies all the time. But the ones in the shadow cabinets, the Conservative front bench, they're no different. And the Conservative administration before this current Labour administration were exactly the same. So, for example, Boris Johnson, throughout his tenure as Prime Minister, said that he is halting immigration, that he is going to ensure that never again will Britain be flooded. Yet, whilst Boris Johnson was saying that in public, in reality, he was flooding the country with immigrants. Something like 3 million immigrants were imported into the UK. So what am I getting at, Lembit? I am saying that the likes of Starmer and Johnson and all of them on the front bench are mere puppets. They are not accountable to Parliament. They are not accountable to the people. If we lived in a democracy, a true parliamentary democracy, in a country where there is the rule of law, they would not be in power. They would not be. They would not even be sitting as backbenchers in the House of Commons. More than likely, they would be in prison. So we need to focus not so much on the likes of Starmer or Sadiq Khan. No, they're puppets. We need to identify and focus on the puppet masters. Starmer could be gone in a few weeks' time. His replacement will be no different to him whatsoever. Sadiq Khan could be replaced. His successor will be no different. We now see, especially since the whole COVID catalyst, that it doesn't matter who is in power, be it Labour, so-called Labour, so-called Conservatives, so-called Liberal Democrats, and that applies now to reform. The policy remains the same. They do the same. That is not coincidence. That is not coincidental. It is because they are puppets. Britain is not a democracy.
Zara Sultana, who is a member of your party, the diminutive group set up by Jeremy Corbyn, who incidentally I like. I find Jeremy Corbyn a very agreeable human being. He's got a presence and a character which I like. He's the kind of person you'd really enjoy spending time with. Well, Zara Sultana said something quite similar to what you said. She said something here which essentially got her chucked out of Parliament because he called him a liar. The whole country knows it. Keir Starmer is a barefaced liar, she says. This is a 30-second clip when she I think's just been ejected by the Speaker for calling Keir Starmer a liar in Parliament. She said it. And so did Lee Anderson, actually, from Reform UK. So I suppose you're not alone in saying this. Question, though, you've made some pretty strong comments there. Question is, right, I want to explore the actual facts as best we can establish them. It seems Keir Starmer is desperately opposed to having this vote. He doesn't seem to want to have the vote about. Oh no, we'll come to the Old Bailey thing after the break if we can. Thanks, but he doesn't want to have this vote, and the vote's about having an inquiry into the facts of the case. I mean, it's basically, I think the opposition party, he's saying they're playing politics. And we'll talk about Bridget Phillipson's road crash interview, in my view, on the BBC this morning if you're watching it live. But he faces this vote and inquiry. Now, about whether he lied about Mandelson. It seems obvious to me, to be honest with you, like you are saying, in my opinion, that he did. That he misled Parliament. Because there are contradictions. He was told he needed to vet this guy before he was appointed. He was appointed before the vetting finished, and yet Starmer kept saying, as if it was a fact, that the whole process had been properly carried out. Now, obviously, it wasn't carried out in a way which identified Mandelson as the massive threat he was. So, at the very least, the process failed. But the fundamental point I've got here, Marcus, is if Keir Starmer was smart and he was not misleading Parliament, surely he should say, yeah, go ahead, have the inquiry, and we'll do it after the local elections. I've got nothing to fear. But instead he's going, I think it's all some kind of a conspiracy to distract people from local elections. What's distracting is the fact he's getting his stooges to go onto television to say we mustn't have an inquiry. It seems to me like a smoking gun.
The British ruling elite wield enormous influence and power in all four corners of the world, and they have done so historically. However, not even the British ruling elite can control everything. So the case concerning Peter Mandelson is a very good example of that. They tried to conceal from the public, from the global public, from the British public and from the global public alike, what had happened. However, as I said, not even the British ruling elite can control everything in the world. Mm-hmm. So the matter concerning Peter Mandelson was leaked into the public domain. Now it's a matter of damage limitation for the British ruling elite. Thus, they have instructed Starmer to do X, Y, Z. So, for example, as you said, not to hold an inquiry, not to hold a vote pertaining to the Mandelson case. And they're doing that because they want to limit the damage. They want to limit the fallout from the Mandelson case. That is why Starmer is doing what he is doing. Starmer has no qualities whatsoever. He has no talent whatsoever. He is a barrister and a QC at that. Yet, listen to his spoken English. His spoken English is woeful at best. So, why was he made a QC? Why? Why on earth would you make a barrister who has such a, at best, average command of the English language a QC? The reason is simple. He is a soulless human being. He is dead spiritually, not physically, of course, but he is dead spiritually. And that is why he was chosen to be the leader of the Labour Party. That's why he was installed as Prime Minister. There is nothing he will not do to serve his masters. Not all the useful idiots, for example, in the House of Commons, are like Starmer. They will do a lot of things for money and other gifts that come with being useful idiots, but they won't necessarily go the full way that Starmer will go. That is why, Lembit, the day after the general election in July of 2024, when I was at Heathrow Airport, getting ready to fly to Florida, I said on social media, now that Starmer has been made Prime Minister, the agenda will excel. Hell on earth awaits the British people. That this is the most dangerous phase of the agenda for the British people. How did I know that? Well, I wasn't alone, Lembit. Other people said the same thing, but we said that because we see the full picture, or certainly the bigger picture. We don't see the likes of Starmer as being independent. We don't see him as being in charge of puppets. And that is why all that we predicted, again, I wasn't the only one in July of 2024, but all that we predicted, including something major, which then happened in August of 1994, revolving around Southport, it all happened. So that is why we must see the bigger picture. And I am encouraged, Lembit, because I would say now most Britons see the bigger picture. They understand that the people at Westminster have no power whatsoever. Is Rachel Reeves, Lembit, really running the economy?
She hasn't got the skills.
Really believe that?
She hasn't got the skills to run it, Marcus.
She wouldn't be able to polish shoes properly.
Yeah. A few comments coming in here. Slum Landlord says nothing's going to change until there's an 80% property crash. David Skatcher says, morning, Lembit and Dr. Marcus, liar, pants on fire. Suggests to me a certain amount of agreement with what you said, adding no mention in any of the legacy media of the Ukrainians accused of arson on Starmer's property. We're going to come to that after the break. Just before we do go to the break, though, and you saw that my team was premature in starting the break while you were talking there. They're not trying to cancel you. Just for this part of the conversation, you're saying that this Keir Starmer and his stooges are basically working for other people because they're easy to control.
Absolutely. That is absolutely the case. They work not just for the British ruling elite, but they work for the Western ruling elites as a whole, which Western ruling elites is the term that I devised a few years ago. But most people know them as globalists. And the Western ruling elites comprise numerous groups, from banking elites to financial elites to Zionists to monarchies to aristocracies and so on. So these are the groups that certainly the likes of Starmer is working for. I don't claim that each and every MP, and I put aside Rupert Lowe now because he's not beholden to anyone, but I'm not saying that each and every MP at Westminster is consciously working for the British ruling elite and the Western ruling elites as a whole. No, some of them really do believe that they have power, that they have influence, but what I'm saying is that without them realizing it, because they really do believe that they have a part to play, they are working for them.
You mentioned that Keir Starmer works for Zionists. Well, they can't be too happy with him because then he suddenly decided to recognize Palestine. He seemed to manage to, leaving aside the whole debate and
That's
the
an
merits
illusion.
of it. He
No,
seems to try to be on both sides.
no, that's an illusion. That is an illusion. The reason why the British state allows one pro-Palestine march after the next is for a reason. The British ruling elite understand that the pro-Palestine movement in Britain is largely in the hands of Islamists. And being that the British state is pro-Zionist and joined at the hip with Israel, they allow these protests to take place on a regular basis, knowing that ordinary Britons will look at these protests, they will be appalled because they will see Islamists there, and it is a way of the British state then gathering more support for Israel. That is why they do that. And then they have to pretend that they are impartial. So they then recognize Palestine. But recognizing Palestine means nothing in practice.
I generally don't talk about the Palestine subject very much because I don't think I can persuade anyone either way. You're watching me, Lembit, talking about Keir Starmer and whether he's to quote David's catcher, liar, liar, pants on fire. After the break, we're going to cover the other point. As I said before, David, there's no mention of any of the legacy media of the Ukrainians accused of arson on Starmer's property. We're going to cover that after the break. Before that, somebody who is never knowingly undersold for truth. I was talking with her yesterday, in fact, another great show from Claire Dyer, Dire Consequences, and she actually covers in her latest show, if you're watching this live, the rather strange case of an alleged gang rape in Epsom, the town of Epsom. And the argument has been that initially the police are investigating this, and then they said there's nothing to see, that it never happened. Do have a look at Claire Dyer's program on this, a very fair and challenging report. That is Claire Dyer's Dire Consequences. Very interesting debate she has with a local resident, actually, Sarah Whitehead, about what's been going on in Epsom. You live quite close to Epsom. The police suddenly seem to find vast numbers of people to turn up to control the local population. That's a very unusual sight in Epsom, which is normally a very mild-mannered town. Quite a confusing story, really. I don't know if you got a view on it.
Epsom, regrettably, Lembit, has been deteriorating for the last few years. So it wasn't a surprise to me what happened a couple of weeks ago. And whilst this episode of your show is not focusing specifically on Epsom, what I would say is this. When the female concerned in this case was admitted to the local hospital, the doctors would have given her a full physical examination. Had she not have been raped, the police would not, a few hours later, have said, we are investigating a case of rape or a case of sexual assault. But what happened was that on Saturday morning of a couple of weeks ago, the Surrey police said they are investigating a case of rape or sexual assault. And then a few hours later, the local MP and the local priest, if I can use that word, at the church concerned said that a horrific case of rape or sexual assault had occurred. So how did it all start? Because, as I said, if the doctors had given her a full examination, which they did, they would have been able to determine whether she had been raped or not. It's very easy to rebut the case of Surrey police.
If you want to know more about that, then do watch Claire Dyer's Dire Consequences, which is available also on the archive. Do like and subscribe to at Unprecedented TV. So it's quite a challenging show, and I think they're fair in what they say. And Marcus, you probably find some alignment with what was said. Let's go back to the other conundrum we've got today. That's Keir Starmer with Peter Mandelson, who was best pal with a convicted paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. This just comes back to haunt him. But there's this other mystery as well. This strange piece of non-coverage which is going on. This is from the Canary. I quite like the Canary. I think they tend to tell it like it is. MSM, that's mainstream media, silent over Starmer arsonist's trial, yet no special reporting restrictions. And this is a strange one. Now, I raise this because it just adds to the mystery and the chaos in Keir Starmer's world. For those who missed it, something like over a year ago now, 3 people were taken into custody, Ukrainian-born, and they were alleged to have set fire to Starmer's current or former property that most people didn't even know he owned. But there's no reporting of this at all in the mainstream media. Why not? Let's be careful. It's an active trial, so we can't make accusations. But why is the mainstream media not reporting something which is very much in the public interest? And here's why it's in the public interest, in my view. It's in the public interest because this is the Prime Minister who was allegedly victim of some kind of assault, or at least his property was. And it's in the national interest to know what's going on. In America, if you're watching this live, there's all kinds of coverage and exposés about an attempt on Donald Trump's life. And Donald Trump himself is insisting on full disclosure on that. Why, Marcus, is it the opposite here? Why aren't we hearing a squeak in the mainstream media, as far as I can see, on this subject?
This is an extremely peculiar case. And of course, I have absolutely no idea as to what actually happened. But the telltale sign that something untoward concerns it is I won't say failure, is the omission by British mainstream media to mention it. Why do I say that it's a telltale sign? Because British mainstream media is neither free nor independent. It is instead controlled by the British ruling elite. So the very fact that mainstream media, both print and broadcast in the UK, has said nothing about this is highly suspicious.
Yeah.
What actually happened there? Again, as I said moments ago, the British ruling elite cannot control everything in spite of their enormous power that they have in the world. They can't control everything. So something has happened, something that they were not able to entirely prevent from coming into the public domain. I suppose, Lembit, it's one of those cases where only time will tell. Let's see how the media start to report, and I use report in a very loose way. Let's see how they start to report on it, because if there is anything politically motivated about the way mainstream media will eventually report on this, then again, that will be another telltale sign.
It does take the Canary to cover it like this. And they're right. MSM silent over Starmer arsonist's trial, yet no special punishment has started. You're watching this live. It's happening pretty much now. And yet it's almost impossible to get any kind of evidence or information. Here's another one. The silence at the Old Bailey. Why is the Starmer arson trial being buried? And it's not at all clear why this is the case. We don't know. And yet I have to say this is very much, in my view, in the public interest. So David's captured his point in the commentary is something I've been asking myself. There is genuinely a public interest in understanding what was being going on here. Was it a conspiracy? What were they trying to do? Were they trying to coerce the Prime Minister? He's a public servant. We've got the right to know this. And yet it's being buried. I don't think we can answer the question, and we certainly can't have the trial on air. But all of this adds up to this feeling that we've got a government in drift, which is under the control of others. We've got a passenger as the prime minister, and incredibly weak people like Bridget Phillipson. In fact, there she is, Bridget Phillipson, who said, I heard her on, if you're watching this live, I heard her on BBC Today programme, which is a radio show this morning, saying that accusations that Keir Starmer misled the Parliament are baseless. And then she opposed the inquiry. She just said it was party politicking. And so all of this Renew Britain, it says there, all of this seems to add up to this ridiculous feeling that we don't have a government which is in control and is running, incidentally, and I just put this out there rhetorically, running their local election campaign on the word pride, which is massively loaded. Can Keir Starmer survive all of this?
Everything you've just said, Lembit, I wholeheartedly concur with. What I would add is this. Let's try and see the bigger picture. We are told we live in an open, transparent society, but we don't, do we? Is the judiciary really independent in this country? No, it's not. Is the media really independent? No, it's not. This one peculiar case, which is ongoing at the Old Bailey, or the Central Criminal Court, as it's officially known as, demonstrates we do not live in an open society. I reiterate, many people understand that Britain is not a democracy, that tyranny comes in different shapes and forms. Indeed, Lembit, a number of newspapers in Britain, for example, the Daily Telegraph, is now running opinion pieces asking, is Britain actually a democracy? The reason why they're doing that is because they want to show that they are independent and that they are in line with British public opinion, because they understand that many Britons now realize that Britain is not a democracy. So the very fact that nothing has been said about a case, a criminal case, which concerns the most senior public servant in Britain, namely the Prime Minister, demonstrates this is not an open society. Far from it. You mentioned Bridget Phillipson, the so-called education secretary. My advice to these so-called public servants, be it in the House of Commons or in the civil service or in the police or elsewhere, is to be very careful, of what they're involving themselves in, because history shows that anything and everything is possible. And by God, Lembit, if there is a revolution in Britain, for example, a nationalist revolution, and only a few years ago, I didn't think the British people were capable of waking up, but that has changed. And if there is a nationalist revolution, and Rupert Lowe is playing a big part in that, then by God, Lembit, people like Bridget Phillipson and all these other so-called public servants will be in very, very serious trouble, because they are associating themselves with a criminal agenda. Indeed, with crimes against humanity.
Well, yeah,
all the money in the world, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes at this moment.
Okay, that's a debate for another day, and beyond where I want to go today. I understand that that's your view and its opinion. Whether or not I agree with you, I'll tell you after the show. Fundamentally, I think what we're learning here, and thank Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos for his view, is that Keir Starmer has questions to answer. He's got questions to answer about whether he misled Parliament. And in my opinion, this is my view, refusing to have an inquiry makes it look like he is guilty, and it makes him look like a hypocrite, because he did call himself for an inquiry into Boris Johnson, and when all that COVID stuff was going on and parties in Downing Street, Now he doesn't want to have an inquiry on something which arguably is far more serious, because he was potentially compromising not just the national security of the United Kingdom, but also the United States by appointing a liar in the form of Peter Mandelson to a very important job. We shall see what happens. If you are watching this live, you might want to watch the evidence being given at one of the committees by some of the staff. I'm not sure how much they'll get out of it, because these people were loyal to Keir Starmer, at least some of them were, but they could reveal something important. In the meantime, the biggest baffling thing for me is exactly as Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos said. Why is a trial into 3 people who apparently, allegedly, damaged the Prime Minister's property not getting more coverage? That's in the national interest. He is the most senior public servant in politics in the UK, and yet we don't hear a squeak about it. We have to go to alternative media to find out. Well, the truth will out there, and in the words of Andrew Bridgen, if the truth comes out there, there could be some very, very dark and surprising revelations. In the meantime, if you find this interesting, and if you like Dr. Papadopoulos, and if you like the show, please do like and subscribe, and tell other people about it as well. At Unprecedented TV, costs you nothing, and you have literally hundreds of shows to look at there. And we don't take them down. If something we say is wrong, you'll find it in the archive. But most of the time, we're right. We have an over 80% hit rate in terms of our predictions. Thanks so much to the team as well, but more than anything, thanks to you for having the courage to think for yourself. We live in dark times. By shining the light of inquiry and curiosity, you do 2 things that the Prime Minister of our country sadly seems terrified of. I'm Lembit Opik. That was Lembit Opik Live.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.